Hello, I'm Bo Mabe, Senior Technical Sales Engineer for Ipswitch WSFTP File Transfer. I want to highlight some of WSFTP Server's features and demonstrate the basic administration tasks associated with the server for you today. WSFTP Server is used by administrators globally to support millions of end users and to transfer billions of files and petabytes of data. It integrates smoothly into a company's existing architecture. The server is Windows-based and installs on XP 2003 32-bit and 2008 32 and 64-bit. It supports an unlimited number of concurrent user connections. We give you 1,000 concurrent connections by default, but this is adjustable to fit your need, limited only by available resources. It scales to support businesses of any size and to grow along with the needs of your company. WSFTP system administrators can add as many hosts as you require, and both system and host administrators can add as many users as you require at no extra cost. WSFTP Server is easy to use and implement, quickly enabling network administrators to achieve the highest levels of security. You have one checkbox to enable FIPS mode and one checkbox to enable SSL mode. Streamline workflows. System administrators can separate internal Active Directory users from external FTP users using hosts, while allowing them to share files and folders via virtual folders. You can gain ultimate control and visibility. You can control what a user has access to, as well as when a user can access the server. Also, utilizing Session Manager, you can see who is connected and what activity they're involved in. Our logging allows you to archive this activity for posterity. WSFTP Server 7.1 solutions deliver a suite of highly secure, fully featured, and easy to administer file transfer servers that enable industry-leading 256-bit AES transport encryption over either an SSH or SSL protocol. WSFTP Server solutions provide proven, trusted software. Ipswitch has been providing the transfer solutions for FTP for over 17 years. While we have over 50,000 WSFTP Server customers and over 40 million WSFTP client customers, easy deployment, management, and administration is one of our hallmarks. Powerful administrative control. System admins can create, delete any part of the server. Host admins can only make changes to the host he or she belongs to. This allows delegation of administrative overhead. We have industry-leading security. Powerful administrator control over server access and user permissions. Also, the strongest encryption strength, 256-bit AES, and highest levels of data integrity, SHA-512. To assist companies in meeting compliance requirements like HIPAA and PCI through encryption of data transfer, we offer SSL and SSH, as well as HTTPS while using the web transfer module. Logging allows monitoring and auditing of client and server activity in 24-hour segments. Enables compliance with regulations and corporate governance requirements. Browser-based transfer capabilities. The web transfer module allows HTTP or HTTPS connections directly to the database using any browser, even Safari and Google's new Chrome. This also eliminates the need to mandate a client to the end users. You can require secure transfers to the server by forcing SSL connections. Scalability and flexibility. WSFTP Server will utilize existing ODBC, LDAP, Active Directory, or SQL databases for user authentication. Any standard space FTP client will connect to the server using FTP, FTPS, or SFTP. Users may also choose to use a browser to connect via the web transfer module. WSFTP comes available in various configurations to suit your needs. At this time, I'd like to give you a short demonstration of some of the more common administrative duties for using our server. Once you install the server, this is the administration portal or the administration page. It's web-based. As you can see, I have it on port 81. With the web transfer module being served up on port 80 by IIS, I like to leave that port 80 alone and use 81 and use our internal web server for management. One of the first things you'll want to go to is host details. The host name will be the name of your server if you don't change that during the install. And you can name your server anything you like. The top folder is created under C Program Files Ipswitch and has the name of the server on it. You can browse and change that at any time. These are all the default settings that you see here. We enable the extended FTP commands so that you can do things greater than get, put, mget, and rget. You can lock uploads if you want to prevent partial downloads or for files in use that cannot be downloaded. Allow third-party transfers. This is very important. If you have another server that allows third-party transfers as well, you can then do a site-to-site transfer using a client. Our user databases, as I pointed out, are ODBC, LDAP, Active Directory, or an SQL server. The default install will create your first host, and it is always a WS FTP server internal user base. Our Postgres database is installed with the installer unless you choose to use an existing SQL. You can move Postgres to SQL at any time you choose by using our dbconfig utility that's installed as well. We usually log users into the home folder. You have a choice of logging them into the root if you wish. That's not usually considered very secure. We create their home folder under our top folder in a folder called users. As you add users and they log in, we create the user's home folder for you automatically. You never want to list all folders in user folder unless that's something that's advantageous. This allows them to see folders that they may not actually have access to. We do, by default, grant full home folder permissions. As I pointed out earlier, we have a maximum connections of 1,000. This is for FTP. If you allow anonymous, and this is by default allowed, you can uncheck here to disallow that. You can then have 200 or more. You can adjust these numbers to suit your requirements. Password complexity is changed here. We track 1 by default, which means you must wait a month before using it again. Most people change this to 12 so that they use no password in a 12-month period. For virtual folders, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and for access to UNC paths, we want to use a domain user who has permission. And if we're using Active Directory, we need to pull from this area as well for permissions to bind. You don't need an administrator, but a power user that has rights to the UNC paths. So you put the domain, the user, and his password in here, and this prevents having to run the service as a domain admin. Under users, I want to point out something very clear. I noted a moment ago that we have 2 types of administrators. This is the administrator who is created during the install. Whatever username that you choose to use, and I would recommend an administrator user on the server you're installing on, simply because that administrator will have permission to any folders that you choose to write to. If you wanted to put it on the D drive, for example, there would be no hesitation in writing to a folder there. We will create an IPS_user to use as a non-privileged user for running the Postgres database. We also create your first FTP system administrator from that very same user, same password. So when you go to log in for the first time, you'd use that user. That is a system admin. He has permission to create hosts, delete hosts, and any other operation that needs to be done on the server. The host admin here in yellow can only affect folders, permissions, and users on the host that they're actually part of. Alan here, for example, is a normal user. He has whatever set of rights by default, only rights to his home folder, and he can only see folders you give him permissions to, and he has all rights to his home folder. A very important thing about users, standard users, is locking them to their home folder. This prevents them from going above that folder. And notice here that this is not a folder called Alan. This is actually a virtual that I've created, and we'll talk about those in a moment, and I've changed Alan's home folder to this virtual. If this virtual, for example, were to point to a UNC path going to a NAS, a SAN, or a remote file server, then he would be redirected there automatically when he logs into the server. His files would not be stored on this server, but indeed on the server that that points to. Again, I want to point out before we get to folders that the virtual folder is used to get access to any folder above the root folder of the host that Alan is a member of. You can actually show his home folder as root when they log in, and a lot of Unix users have requested this in the past, so now we can do that. Rather than showing the exact path to this home folder, it will only show the / or root. The account can be expired in daily increments. If you have contractors working with you, for example, and you wanted to expire them on a certain day, you simply need to come here and do that. By default, we do not expire. They are set to never expire. I'm going to hit cancel here because I like the way Alan is set up now, and I want to keep that for posterity. User groups. User groups are used for permissions and to assign permissions to folders without having to go to each folder and touch it. I can assign the Joe group read and write access to one folder, while test can have read, write, and delete. If I add users to the test folder and this test folder is given permission on certain folders, then each user in that folder, even if they're a part of Joe, will then gain the delete permission. If I have a deny delete here, then even though Joe may have delete permissions, if he becomes a member of the test folder, he will lose that permission. We have begun to use very much Windows-like permissions in our server for clarity. Let's take a look at folders, which is by all means the most important part of server. Here's the users folder that we create all of the user folders under automatically. Again, this is by default and it's automated, and you can change. As you see, this virtual folder is what I created and used as Alan's home folder just for demonstration. These particular virtuals use UNC paths to other machines. They are also set to view or display in the root. Let's open Alan or Adnan here, and I'll show you another thing you can do with virtuals. These particular virtuals are set to show or display in user. They are not seen, as you can plainly see, in the root. This allows you to give access to folders full of information that all users may need without having to actually give them permission to this folder as it lists on the NTFS. You can create this virtual and have it display in the user. To the user, it looks exactly like a subfolder. If they do not have permission to these folders, as you simply click here and allow them to have permission, you can disallow any number of permissions. If Alan, for example, only needs list, read, and write here, he needs to be able to see them, get, and put files, but not delete. I have him set where he cannot do that. And these other two have full permission, and including subfolders. Now, rules and notifications. Failed login rule. Let's take a look at that. You can name these anything you want to, and they're fully configurable, and they send notifications. If he fails to log in 3 times, he'll be disabled. You can go back in and edit his user at any time you wish and reset his login. It'll reset by itself in a matter of moments. Let's go back and take a look at the rules. I want to show you one that's very important. Most people are using the folder action rule. This one I've named upload. You can name it anything you wish. And let's take a look inside of the configuration. This user is watching for is watching for any file in this particular folder, including all subfolders of that folder, for this user or this group of users to upload. These triggers will cause the notification to be sent. You can pick and choose or leave them as they are now. As an additional bonus, we include the ability to execute a program action when the rule is triggered. This one, for example, is a batch file on my C drive named calc.bat, and all it does is simply start the calculator and display it. But you could use a batch file, for example, that would move and rename your files or delete the files once they're uploaded successfully. There are a myriad of uses for those rules. We also have quota limit rules that limits the number of files and the amount of files that can be stored. That is cumulative. Once they reach that limit, they'll get an error. Quota limit is exceeded. Bandwidth limits are exactly what they say they are. If you have many users and they like to use a great amount of your bandwidth, Jane, for example, can only get 100 KB per second no matter what. Global, this user, maybe a group, can have that whole meg per second. All right, let's go back to the home folder. There are a couple of other things we need to really take a look at. We've covered rules. I want to show you listeners. Some folks are confused because they only purchase the base server without SSH. We'll include this listener anyway. We simply don't put the service behind it. But if you have one of the servers, and I mentioned in the slides that they come in many configurations to suit your need. We're going to give you 21, which is used for explicit SSL as well as standard FTP connections, and 990 for implicit SSL. We have it listing on the standard ports on all IP addresses by default. You can change this to a certain IP if it is a multi-homed box or if you have multiple IP addresses. As well, we include the keys for the SSH connections, and we include the SSL certificates for both the explicit and implicit SSL. They are self-signed, and you can get certificates with the CSR file from this server. You can generate your own, send it to Thought or VeriSign, and have them sign your certificate, and then you have a CA authority. The same is true for the web transfer module. Remember, it's served out of IIS, and there you would have to generate your certificate through IIS, send that away, get an IIS certificate, bring it back, import it, and automatically you have a CA authority for your web transfer module. I mentioned hosts is a separation device. As you can see, I have many hosts here. This is my default, always an FTP user database. Here I'm using LDAP to gain access to an Active Directory I'm not a member of. This is an LDAP server. I've got FTP users here coming from a SQL server. This one actually uses local users from the same box I'm on. This is another one using the same users as I'm on. This is a remote SQL server as well. You can have as many hosts and as many users as you require at no extra cost. It is wonderful for separation of users. Our logging is kept in XML files stored in the logging folder on the machine. Our logs, if we were to view the log for, let's say, 14:15 for 1 hour, they're color keyed so that it's easy to understand. There are no errors here, and this is set to verbose, so the entire conversation between a client and the server are always logged. When notifications are used, notice this is an HTTPS connection, as I am connected right now with the web transfer module, which I'll be showing you that in a moment. If you send a notification and it's an SMTP notification, the entire SMTP conversation is logged if you're in verbose mode. You can export this to an XML file, import it into an Excel spreadsheet, and create a wonderful report. Let's go back to our home page. Notice I keep going back to the home page. This is where all of your administration occurs, and everything is here. We've already talked about notifications, but I'll show you that we not only use email, but pager and SMS as well. And this is where you would come to create those. Then you can assign them to any of the rules that you need. Once you've installed the web transfer module, you'll have to come to modules here and allow users to have access to your web transfer module. They are not vicariously awarded that or given that permission. You can use the Everyone group here, and then they will be granted permission to the web transfer module simply by virtue of the fact that you've created them in the server. Taking a look down here, you can create your own SSL certificate, as I said earlier, sending off the CSR file to a certificate authority and get back a certificate that you can use and have a CA authority to back it up. In the Session Manager, I mentioned that during the slides, you can see all the activity going on the server, who is connected, who isn't, and you can actually end the session from here. All of this is kept in the logs as well and can be archived for posterity. In the log settings, this is a very important place to come to. Notice mine's set to verbose. By default, it would be set to normal. Verbose gives you the greatest amount of logging you could possibly have, and it gives you the entire conversation in the logs. Very helpful for troubleshooting or determining what happened if you didn't get a notification, for example. One of the largest and most requested additions to server that we've ever had is IP lockouts. We called it anti-hammering in the beginning. The IP lockout, by default, is set to 10 attempts. I find that most people are setting this to 3. The time period, by default, is 15 hours. You can set it to minutes, days, or seconds. As well as the blacklist entries expire after so many days, hours, or minutes, or seconds. You can choose to receive an email when an address is added to the blacklist or when it's removed from the blacklist. This is the very same notification I was using for the rules, as you recall. If you have users that you never want added to a blacklist, no matter what, simply adding them to the whitelist will prevent that. Let's go back out to the home page again. You can, as always, add users to a blacklist And you can add pools of IP addresses here, an entire range if you chose, and they would never be able to gain access to your server. With that, that's a pretty good overview of what it looks like when you're managing the server. This is our web transfer module, for those of you who have not seen it, a far cry from the bland white sheet with just a few folders and files that you have to right mouse click or drag and drop from if you use a browser. Like a client, you have an upload, download, new folder, rename, delete, refresh. You can also change folders if you have permission and you're not locked to your own folder. Up, when you just click home, it'll bring you right back here. We do have some context-sensitive help. We have a few facts, and notice this, change password. If you did not deny, and by default we allow this, if you do not deny change password, you can click here and actually change your password. You must know your old one, and there is a dialog that goes along with that. I'm going to show you in just a few moments how this can be branded to your organization and your colors. And with that, let's take a look at some of the branding. This one was branded for Ferris State University. It's a great deal more like familiar if you were a student and logging in. You'd want to see this rather than the WSFTP background, of course. Here's another one for University of Nevada. As you can tell, it's a friendly environment. Any of these buttons will stay persistent. Let's say you don't have permission to make new folder. If you click new folder, it will tell you permission denied. If you don't have download or read permissions, and you click download, permission denied again. So the buttons stay persistent, but you must have permission to use them. We hope this webinar has been informative and useful. As a thank you for attending, you will automatically be entered into our sweepstakes to win a set of Bose Quiet Comfort headphones. We also like to thank you with the following special offer. If you purchase WSFTP server with a service agreement, you'll receive a free 5-pack license of WSFTP Professional. If you have any questions about this webinar, would like more information about WSFTP server, or would like to take advantage of the special offer, please contact us at Ipswitch File Transfer 781-676-5800, or as always, you can send an email, WSFTPserver@ipswitch.com. At this time, I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and I do hope this has been helpful, and you have a wonderful day.